Hello, my name is Blade, and today I'll be reviewing Evil Dead Burn. So, Evil Dead has returned yet again to put us all through it. You know, if you're familiar with Evil Dead, you know, the original franchise definitely was gory, but like in a campy way. The newer, updated franchise is gory in a wholly, I can't say a curse word this early in the video, but in a wow kind of way. And this one definitely did not disappoint on that front. But before I get into the thick of it, I always like to say at the beginning, you know, I'm assuming you haven't been here before, I always do a spoiler-free and spoiler section. Sometimes I don't, depending, but most of the time I do. So don't worry, if you haven't seen it, you'll be warned beforehand. I always do recommend you watch the movie and support movies, but you know what? I can't stop you from watching the review if you want to watch the review. And also, I mean, it helps me, so I'm not going to complain. Secondly, this is normally something I reserve for the end of the video, or like honestly kind of forget entirely. But if you're somebody who is an avid YouTube watcher, I'm sure you've heard about how the algorithm is changing and whatnot. So I do kind of have to say at the top of the video, if you enjoy the video and the review, I do lots of reviews here on the channel. I also am a filmmaker myself and make little projects, and overall my channel I talk about films, through video essays or monthly watch list recaps. So if you enjoyed the video, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But you know, I'm going to make the best of having to say that because I would like to hear your thoughts. So, you know, do leave a comment and consider subscribing. With all that out of the way, we can get into the review. So Evil Dead Burn is about, after the loss of her husband, a grieving woman seeks solace with her in-laws at their secluded family home. However, it soon becomes a reunion from hell as the Book of the Dead unleashes demonic forces that transforms them into Deadites one by one. So, give or take, it is the formula we've come to know in this newer Evil Dead reboot franchise, just with the, I want to say the added twist of like a family, but not really, because the last one was about a family. But I think the difference here is we're following post-mortem of a family member, and there's some interesting family dynamics going on. But before I jump into the thick of all that, I think where I'm going to start is I always like to kind of give context to how I went into the movie. You know, I think it's important to kind of understand that perspective so you understand where the review is coming from. So that being said, I am a fan of the original Evil Dead franchise, and even more so, I'm a huge fan of the reboot. I think the 2013 reboot Evil Dead, I love that movie. I own it on physical media. I love how gnarly it is. Like, I really, really love that movie. Evil Dead Rise is a mixed bag for me. I like aspects of it, and the first time I watched it, it didn't totally click for me. I remember my family was like, oh my god, I love this, and then I was kind of like the buzzkill who was like unsure. On rewatches, ironically with my family and one time separately, I've come to like it more. I think they just really, really leaned into the camp in that one, and it was just like not what I was necessarily anticipating, but I have come around to it. But I'm definitely more Evil Dead 2013 than Evil Dead Rise. So that being said, I was excited to get into this one. I kind of basically avoided a lot of I hadn't seen a trailer or anything. I had just seen like some promotional materials, but I hadn't seen a lot. And even then, honestly, they played the teasers and stuff kind of correctly, because I don't think it gave away too much once I actually watched the movie. So first and foremost, I have to say, I think the filmmaking here is great. You know, with Evil Dead movies, you just think like, oh, like gory, slightly camp, like fun time horror movies, but you kind of forget the filmmaking, especially in these new ones, actually like really goes off. There's great cinematography, there's lots of cool shots and angles. I think they even did some new stuff in this one that was really cool. I can't speak on it too much in spoilers, but like there was some really cool like tracking shots, and like the way the camera moved and like followed a lot of the action that was happening. Like really, really cool. They also managed to like do things that were, well, I could say this without spoiling it because you won't know in what way until you watch the movie. They of course bring back the iconic like camera like going through the woods or like following and doing all that, but they in this one they bring it back in a way where they kind of do something different with that, and it was really cool. And I think they did a lot of things like that in this movie. It wasn't too much, but they definitely did subvert a lot of expectations, like knowing this is a third in this specific franchise. So I like that they, like did the thing, like because we're expecting it, we kind of want it, but also found new ways to do it. Additionally, I think there was good use of humor in the movie, but it was almost like the middle point of Evil Dead Rise and Evil Dead, where because Evil Dead Rise is a lot more campy and a lot more funny than Evil Dead, but this one kind of lands somewhere in the middle where I think it has the brutality of the first one of the Evil Dead, but then the slighter comedic tones of Evil Dead Rise, but it's not as heavy as Evil Dead Rise. I will say there was a few times where like I don't think that comedic touch like had to be in that moment, but it did get me to laugh, and it is effective, so I didn't mind it. And I kind of forgot that there was humorous tones because Evil Dead has humorous tones, but like in a very specific tone. In kind of it's so crazy demonic things are happening that you end up just laughing, and like some of the like stuff the demon says is like so absurd. But in Evil Dead Rise, it's kind of a bit more like, oh god, what's the word? It's a bit more. Well, first of all, Evil Dead Rise is a lot more camp, but also there's a lot of physical humor, I think. But this one kind of finds the middle point of that, but it's kind of neither here or there, honestly. It doesn't add too much to the movie, but it doesn't really take away a lot either. But I guess just know if you're somebody who really wants like the high camp, you might not fully get that. You will get it in the killing and in like the gore, but you won't really get it in like the things that are being said. That is a perfect place to jump onto my next point, though, which is what I think a lot of people probably want to hear and know. I have to say, this is pretty gnarly. There's not a lot of necessarily like, I don't think any of the ways that people die per se in this one are like the most unique. Like, don't get me wrong, there are unique things that happen, but like what ultimately like does it in isn't necessarily like a super unique kill. But man, is there some really cool stuff in this one. I was debating in the movie theater, I was like, I think this might be the gnarliest Evil Dead there's been of the three so far, and I can't tell if I think that's true. I'd have to rewatch the other two because I can recall stuff that happened in the other two that were like as a kill, and even like moments that happened that were way crazier. But at the same time, I think why this one I might say is the gnarliest of the three is it was so relentless, and not like it was bad pacing. It did have good pacing, but it was just like boom boom boom, like with the gore and like the stuff that was happening, where honestly it was really sick. I think they did really cool stuff. The way the momentum built with all of the kills too were great. There are some aspects where I do think the ball was dropped, but I'll probably expand on that more in the spoilers. But I have to say, I think most people going into an Evil Dead movie are like fans and are okay with gore, are probably anticipating, because I think this franchise has built a name for itself on like being able to be innovative in that way and do cool practical effects. So do not worry, that is very much present, and there's some cool stuff that happens in my opinion. So normally I do like to do a section where I comment on the acting in the movies, but honestly, like, the acting is good, so I don't want anyone to take this as I'm not saying it's not good. Like, it is good, but there's nothing like to write home about as far as the acting goes. It does what it needs to do for the movie, and it's not anything crazy beyond that, so I don't feel a need to really like elaborate on it. All I will say is Hunter Dohan. Don't really know. I honestly haven't heard his last name pronounced before, but I don't often like to thirst over people on this channel, but I will say that is somebody who is nice to look at. So lastly, in the spoiler free, I just want to talk about the actual like writing and story a bit, and that honestly is probably a bit where my criticism side has to come out. First of all, what I will say that I did like was, again, like I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of subversive elements, even beyond just like the Evil Dead formula. I think there was even other things that they were just very clever about in horror, like knowing it was a horror movie and what audiences were going to expect, and they like subverted those things and flipped them on their heads in a cool way. But I also think they had a lot of fun with motifs. The burn part of this Evil Dead was not lost on the movie. They could have added a little bit more elements in the middle chunk, I think, that could have been to deal more with fire. But there was a lot of stuff in the dialogue and the actual things that were happening where they were very much playing around with the motif of like fire and burning. I will say in the beginning, in the, I guess, like the more exposition part, they were a little heavy-handed with the burning and kind of like stuff in the things that were being said, but like in a fun way. I didn't mind it, but it was just a little bit where I was like, I hope to God this is not how the whole movie plays out, and it did not. Where I do have to criticize a little bit, and who knows, this might change with a rewatch, but I do think the writing was just a tad, I don't want to say underwhelming. Maybe just a tad. It could be stronger. I think, first of all, which I will break down more in spoilers, but it was a bit hard to follow the opening. The opening was a bit confusing as a setup. Like it was like I for like a good like 20 minutes I kept questioning the lore of what was going on, even with the context of the other two movies. I just feel like the opening could have been written differently, and I'm not one of those people that needs to be spoon-fed information. It wasn't one of those cases. I just think they needed to do something to kind of concretely say like what exactly was going on, because it was just it was, maybe it's more of an editing issue and not a writing issue, but the way it was like laid out and unfolded I just felt was a bit confusing. But that I will also 100% say I could have been relying too much on the previous two movies and what I understand about the world and the world building of this universe, that maybe I was putting too much of that onto this one, and that so it was confusing me. But even that aside, I just think overall the writing could be stronger. There was some stuff with the family dynamics that, while I did enjoy, I feel like they could have invested us a little bit more in individual characters, because it is a horror movie. These people are like more than likely not gonna die / be turned into deadites. But there was like the main girl that I was invested in, and I did find her story and like kind of the background there interesting, and I was rooting for her, but there wasn't like as much emotional depth I think that there could have been. But you know, this movie isn't trying to be like some big like epic like family drama, so I'm not really critiquing it too hard on that. I just think that is an observation that I have. I will say though, I do really enjoy the family like dynamic theme. I think that's interesting for an Evil Dead movie to explore. They did have a family dynamic in the last one, but it was, that was still like a little bit more interpersonal, introspective with the sister. It wasn't as much about their dynamic as a whole, whereas this one very much so is like getting into family dynamics and stuff. But I think that was cool to see in this movie, because it's not a movie that really you would expect that from, so I liked that. All right, with all of that out of the way, I am going to be moving into the spoiler section now, so you have been warned. If you want to watch this movie without spoilers, turn back now. I don't think I have anything too like crazy spoilery to say, but I do have some things that touch about spoilers, so you've been warned. So first of all, I want to touch on the like subversive stuff I was mentioning before, and like there's like a specific thing I really want to talk about. The opening with the lake, I thought was really cool because it's Evil Dead Burn. We're not really anticipating like water or anything like that. So I think to open with a body of water as like the main thing, to get us like started going, is really fun and subversive, and is also a little bit of a like a throwback to the opening of Evil Dead Rise. And then, even more so, the fact that the demon, like, boils the water. First of all, really cool. Never seen that before in a horror movie. Like, a whole entire body of water burning, like a lake. But also, like, the concept of a demon being powerful enough to like boil an entire body of water is like really like scary and cool. Like I think that's fun. But once again, subversive because we're bringing in the burning hot element, but with water, which is just not what you would expect. And then they carried that throughout the movie in a lot of ways that I really liked, like with little motifs like the cigarette thing, and the this is in the trailer, so I guess I don't have to put it in spoilers. But like the when one of the girlfriends, or the only girlfriend of Hunter Doohan's character, when she like drinks the wax, and I don't know, there's just like a lot of little things here and there like that that I think were really cool. Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna like say something and then it left me. So I think what I do have to touch upon now, though, is like kind of my grievances with the writing that I was talking about in the spoiler-free section. The opening just had me a little bit confused, and I don't know if I have a feeling maybe I was relying too much on the world building of the previous movies, is maybe what it was, or there was some sort of information that I missed right at that jump. Because I'm not gonna lie, I was so focused on like I really liked how cool the little opening shots were of um like the machinery and stuff that maybe I like just didn't catch something. But what I was confused about is nobody ever like actually summons the demon. Like the demon in fact is the one who utters the words that need to be said to bring them on, but it's already happening. So I don't know if maybe when he was playing that tape, because I do recall it saying something about like even if you're just thinking about it or like something like that, that they'll smell it and like come. So I think that's what ultimately brought the demon out. But I don't know. It was kind of confusing me because in the other movies it has to be like explicitly said aloud or like played or something. So I was just kind of confused because then I later on the lead actress or the lead character does start to read it and then stops, and that's like a funny little subversive thing they do. But that made me go, okay, no, so it is supposed to be that stuff in the beginning. So I think maybe that was just like a me thing, but I just did find it a little bit confusing. I think maybe there was a more explicit way to get it across. Like I said earlier, I'm not someone who needs to be like spoon fed information. I watch a lot of movies, and a lot of my favorite movies are a bit more abstract, ambiguous, like no questions answered. So I definitely am not that type of audience member. I just think something about it confused me, but I acknowledge maybe that's just a me thing. So the other part, like I mentioned in spoiler free, is I just feel like we could have gotten to know the characters a little bit more beforehand, because that was also something that was a little bit confusing until it was said out loud. I genuinely could not tell the family dynamics until we were at the funeral. I don't think it was clear enough, because obviously the lead had her husband, and we knew that. That was clear that they were a couple. But then until something more coupley was said, I didn't realize the brother that was his girlfriend. I thought maybe I was like, oh, are these all siblings? And then for a second I was like, oh, are they all friends? But then it becomes a little bit more clear. But and that maybe that once again, I hope that doesn't make me sound stupid. But the reason is because her husband that dies, he calls his brother bro. But it's very common, for guys to like call each other bro. Like hell, I live in California. We call it the fucking like table bro. So it didn't automatically like tell me that they were brothers, and they were all like talking in a way like a friend dynamic could even talk. So it really wasn't clear until we got to the funeral that like who was what and with all that. But beyond that, I just thought, I don't know, like I think they did do a good job of developing the relationship to the husband. It was tumultuous. It was like he was very abusive. So there was that investment there, and I understood things as they unfolded, and it did help the family dynamics. I think they did this weird thing where the family dynamic is really well written and understood, but our actual depth and like compassion for the individual characters separate from the dynamic wasn't as strong. Now this is like an hour 40 horror movie. And it's not like a a horror movie that's really like deeply emotional at its core, so I understand why we're not like I'm not expecting that from this, but I do think it was just a teensy bit needed to warrant like some of the emotional like devastation of like losing some of these people, whereas like Evil Dead, the 2013 one, did that, and then Evil Dead Rise didn't do that. Well, they did, but it was more comedic, so like I don't know. I just feel like that's where it loses its balance a little bit in the writing, but I think overall it was good. And also, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but her husband was very much of a gaslighter, and I can't help but wonder if that was also something leading into like the burn motif, but that could be me doing too much. But overall, like, this isn't me harping on the writing. I just think if I'm gonna like do a review and like be critical of things, it could have just been like a hair tightened up. So overall, those are my comments, concerns, critiques, observations about Evil Dead Burn. I think this is a really fun installment of the new franchise. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there is an after credit scenes that makes me wonder if we're not quite wrapped up with the franchise. Yeah, but as far as this one, I don't know where it lands for me in the ranking, especially because I love the 2013 Evil Dead, so I don't really know where I would put it between the other two, but a fun time, gnarly as hell. I mean, like, I was in that theater going, like several times, okay? Like, I was physically reacting to it, but good time. Recommend for horror fans. Really recommend for Evil Dead fans. Really happy to be doing a review. Again, it's been a while. The last one was Backrooms, just because things were a little bit slow. There was movies I could have reviewed, but I just didn't feel like the need to. But glad to be back. I'll definitely be here for the Odyssey next week. I hope that review is not 10,000 years long. It's a longer movie, but that's all for now. If you enjoyed this, like, comment, subscribe. I have to say it again to hope that this video even performs at all, really. But anyways, that's all for now. So I will see you in the next one.